Hey, my name is Julian Varas, and I'm the CEO and founder of C1 Do One, a net tech that wants to change the world. We learn skills. For those who don't know me, I'm also an associate professor at Católica University. I'm a general surgeon who has been dedicated to research how to we transfer skills in person and remotely for the last 13 years. And I am the vice chair of simulation training, but also at the same time, I'm now the CEO of this startup that wants to help institutions transform their classic in-person workshops to a remote digital experience. I'm going to talk about the future of learning skills and how this is looking for the next 10 years. So in order for us to understand a skill, we need to know how to measure a skill and how to assess it. This is a conceptual model called the Miller's Pyramid, where it has 4 levels. And at the beginning, we traditionally learn from, and we can assess the traditional knowledge by just applying regular classic tests. So for instance, if you want to know if a surgeon knows how to perform an appendectomy, it is not only important to assess if the knowledge is okay, but also if the skills are there. So will this surgeon be able to perform and treat the appendicitis? And it's not so easy because usually, as even if people don't know, in countries when surgeons are recertifying their titles, when they are achieving and accrediting that they are general surgeons, they don't get practical skills tests. What they get is a knowledge test. So this is something that needs to change in the future. So we will cover these 4 levels that are very interesting and very important. The 4th level is the easiest to remember, but very difficult to acquire, and is the real practice. When you are, for instance, as a surgeon, I'm treating a real patient. If I'm teaching you guitar lessons, the 4th level is a concert, the real deal, the real scenario. The 1st level, though, is knowledge. And before we actually practice a concert, we need to understand how musical scales work, how to play the guitar as a concept. Then you will have some tests that will try if we can compose music or not. In surgery, it happens the same thing, or in nursing, or in any discipline that has practical skills. So the important here is that we need to be able to measure every level of performance. So the 2nd level, the know-how, usually, as an example, we can ask a trainee to be able to, how will this trainee respond to an actual clinical case in a virtual scenario. So for instance, we can incorporate virtual scenarios and see if a trainee will be able to perform well in theory, if they are able to do, for instance, how to take a blood sample, if it's a nursing type of exercise. And we will understand if they know what the protocol is, how to do a sterile procedure. But if we want to understand if the practical skill works, so for instance, if they know how to manipulate the needle, how to cross the tissue, how to take the sample, then you will need a simulated scenario. And usually the virtual reality simulated scenarios are not enough. You need to transfer the skills from a virtual reality scenario to an actual hardware that permits and allows to have haptic feedback and let you, we're heading there, but we're not yet there. We are soon to get this into these virtual scenarios that will be able to train us very good in skills. Another example that I always say is if you're playing FIFA, PlayStation, soccer, this doesn't mean that you are a good soccer player. What it only means that you have learned the rules of soccer and how to use a joystick. So in order for me to teach you soccer is a very nice application, and we would be moving in the level 1 and level 2 of this Miller's Pyramid. But we will still need to have this 3rd level assessed in a real football field so that the trainee shows me that they are acquiring the actual skill. So it doesn't happen that often, especially in the healthcare area. And the real scenario would be a game of soccer. So an actual game of soccer, and to see the performance of the trainees. So how do we transfer skills? It's not that easy, because it's not like you can watch a webinar and then you have the skill. You need to practice, and you not only need to practice, you need to have good quality practice. What is good quality practice? It's to repeat in time a session where you are actually performing the procedure and receiving feedback on how to demonstrate this, how to improve the skill while you are doing the practice. So in short term, in short sense, it means that you practice with effective feedback. So someone is telling you where your mistakes happen, and what once you do this type of mistake, how to improve this mistake, and that's good quality practice. So we need some at least these three pillars in order for us to transfer skills. The first pillar is the space and infrastructure. We need a place where we can actually train. So in the example of a guitar, we need a guitar. If you're going to learn music, you need a guitar, and you will, if you want to learn soccer, you will need a ball or a field, and you will need some hardware. Depending, let's say in the guitar example that I want to teach you, advanced guitar, you will need maybe a closed room, you will need a microphone, you will need a streaming system to record yourself. That's all the pillar one. You also need a second pillar called the training program. What are you going to do in every session? What is the objectives? What is the instructional design for this course to happen, so that you can actually learn the skills and decrease the learning score? So this is very interesting, because usually training programs are not that valid. What I mean with validated is that the program tells, if a program is telling you you are going to finish with advanced skills of guitar, you actually end up with those skills. If you end up with basic guitar skills, then the program is not that valid. In simple terms, if the program can predict that you will do in the fourth level of the Miller's pyramid, you will perform good in this level, then the program is valid. If the program trains you and it's not enough for you to perform good in the fourth level, then we're having a problem. So, and as I was telling you, to have good quality practice means to not only repeat, but repeat with feedback. So the third pillar has to do with who is giving this feedback, who is giving this type of feedback, and how will you incorporate feedback so that your performance improves. This is how we train in surgery nowadays. We develop these training courses in Católica. Everything that you see here is simulated. It's not real. And the good thing about this is that you can actually train it with perfused silicone tissues or perfused scenarios that will allow you to feel like it's real. It will have haptic feedback. Many training programs are now evolving to virtual reality type of programs, but still this kind of scenarios that are more complicated and more complex to solve, usually surgeons need this type of other simulators that are hands-on. We are seeing here that they are basically trying to replicate all types of scenarios, but this is only a first pillar. It doesn't mean that there's a simulation program going on. We need to understand a second pillar. So here I'm showing you a video of a second pillar where trainees are trying to do a bowel anastomosis. This is very complex for a surgeon to perform. This means that they will get together this side of the bowel and with this other side of the bowel by doing intracorporeal suturing, and it's not very easy for trainees to do it. So they need a lot of feedback and they need a lot of sessions. How many sessions? In order to understand how a training program behaves, we need to measure every session and understand how the learning curve is now showcasing. So for instance, in the first to 16 sessions, I can see that a group of 25 residents that are here, once they are trained, the blue line is the outliers and the light blue is the outliers. So worse and better performance. And the media is the black line. And we can see how the complete group gets over 20 out of 25 point of scores. That for us is the expert level threshold after session 10. So once we're training surgeons, we know for sure that after session 10, they are acquiring a very good level of performance in the simulated environment. This doesn't mean that they will actually perform better in the real scenario. I need to do an experiment that is, we call it a transfer of skills to the real scenario. So we need to measure also in the real scenario with actual real patients if these trainees will perform better or not. So you can see here that the complete group has a very low performance from a surgical point of view, from a technical point of view, and the complete group ends up being very good in the simulated scenario. But again, this is not predicted validity. We still need to measure in the real scenario. This could be that, for instance, with the example of FIFA PlayStation that I was telling you before, if a kid is playing FIFA and they are really good at now the game, does this mean that they are going to be good at the actual real game, playing soccer in the field? And we need to measure this. So what we did next was to compare junior trainees. This means recently graduated medical doctors, physicians that get into the surgery residency at their first year, and we train them with the advanced laparoscopy program, the one I just showed you. And we compare them to general surgeons graduated from 5-year traditional formation, but without this kind of simulation. And what we wanted to understand is the performance improved with this simulation training before the patients. We measured them on patients, and also we compared them to experts. As you can see, the simulation training program is much better. The performance of junior trainees recently graduated from med school are much better than general surgeons graduated from 5-year training programs, performing a complicated case, real cases on patients. So why is this happening? We are simply adding a complement of the classic general surgery residency formation called simulation. And this complement of simulation training is boosting the performance of these trainees. So it is very important for us to realize that training with deliberate practice, this means training with repeating and receiving feedback, is much better than just going through the years and receiving traditional formation without simulation. So who is giving the feedback? And it is very important for us to understand that usually in soccer, who gives feedback to these trainees is the guy that is right here in the back. This is an expert person that has trained to give feedback. They know exactly what to say. They know exactly the level of performance of these kids of Paris Saint-Germain. And usually what we do in the healthcare area or in many industries is, instead of having an expert in giving feedback, we call the expert in the field. The expert in the field, in the case of soccer, would be Messi. So we usually call Messi to give feedback to these kids in Paris Saint-Germain, and this has no sense at all. What we need to do is to start creating professional teachers that know exactly what type of input these trainees need and how to train these teachers to acquire the way to communicate well to these trainees. With this in mind, we now know for sure that you can transfer a skill. You will have the first pillar, the hardware. Let's remember the example of the guitar lessons. You will need a guitar. Then the training program will be the number of sessions needed and the type of feedback and how we will create this course so that you graduate and, for instance, acquire advanced guitar. And the third pillar is the instructors. Who will give the feedback and how are they going to do this? With all of this in mind, we realize that we don't need Messi for teaching all kinds of skills. What we need is expert teams that can be trained in how to give feedback, and that can easily be achieved. And with all of this in mind, we started thinking of how we can construct a platform that can enable the three pillars to happen anywhere in any institution. This is when we started to create C1 Do One. So the name is like C3 view, but it's to watch things and then perform things. C1 Do One. And the example I'm going to show you is the laparoscopic course that we were using with surgeons. So first of all, a trainee will download the app, will be able to watch a tutorial video. And once the tutorial video is watched, the trainee will be able to go to the training center and perform the exercise. But once the trainee is performing the exercise, it will be recorded and uploaded to a cloud. Once it's in the cloud, the good thing is that this video will be assessed asynchronously, not at the same time, by a network of teachers. And the network of teachers is already training the platform and also to how to give feedback. For instance, in this example, the network of teachers of Católica University is now assessing this type of videos in 16 cities around the world for 600 surgeons a year. So this is an amazing impact. Imagine one surgeon has the ability to operate between 100 to 400 cases in 1 year. So to be able to train 600 surgeons a year is an amazing impact. So the teachers now can assess the video. They can put pause in everywhere they want, and they can add comments. They can add audio memos like in WhatsApp. They can draw in the screen. They can send all of this video back to the trainee. The trainee will receive the feedback and evaluate his own instructor, like an Uber driver. But not only that, they will be able to watch over and over again their feedback inputs. And this will allow the trainee to go back to the training sessions or to train again and receive feedback once again from the trainee, from the trainer. So does this laparoscopic course work in a remote fashion? We compared the in-person training, so trainers that are right there with receiving instruction in a workshop, giving instruction in a workshop to trainees, and we compared them to remote and asynchronous fashion. So the control group here is in-person training, and the laparoscopic group here, the lab group, is the remote trainees that are trained in different regions in Chile. And we showed that both groups acquire the same level of performance, and we know for sure that they will do really good in real cases, as I showed you before in the validation studies. So trainees are not only good at now operating, and they are being trained distantly, but also what is happening is that they are faster in the procedure. When the COVID-19 hit, what was happening was that we were already training surgeons remotely. And this is very interesting because we were able to sustain our trainings while the pandemic was happening. And the problem about this is that many institutions were just closed because they couldn't sustain any kind of programs, because most of the teachers were doing in-person training. So we realized that there was a solution to this kind of training under the pandemic. But not only that, we were harvesting very interesting data of how the trainees were training, how the trainers, how the teachers were giving feedback. And this data can be analyzed and be and it's very interesting for us to understand what is a good feedback, what is a good teacher, or how is the performance of your teachers, how is the performance of your trainees. So we were very happy with this kind of minimal viable product in surgery. So what happens in other areas? What about, for instance, helping in the nursing area or the physical therapy area or other specialties of medicine in healthcare? We expanded this type of training to other areas fastly, And they were using the platform to train physical therapists, nurses, and other skills. I'm going to show you how different disciplines are using C1Do1 to receive feedback, effective feedback, and videos of different types of trainees in different disciplines. So here's how a nurse will be training a procedure, or a student training a sterile procedure. And you can see how the teachers can draw in the screen, can put an audio memo. Then the trainees will be able to receive this in her or their own cell phone, and they will be able to watch it over and over again until they feel that they have the skill that they have understand it, how to improve the skill, so that they can return to the skills lab and train again. Some of the training can happen at home, and we can see many trainees working from home and receiving feedback from home depending on the type of discipline and skill that they are learning. You can see here for electricians, technicians, C1Do1 is helping them to different institutions to assess these trainees. We see here another type of case, a gastronomy course, that this trainee is receiving feedback inputs right in his home, and he's now being able to improve his skills by receiving the precise input of how to do and what to do and how to improve these mistakes that he's committing. Sometimes they don't commit mistakes, and you can just mention that they're doing the right thing. C1Do1 is also being used now for many types of areas, such as in this case, they're teaching how to code in different programming languages, and they are being able to write in the screen. They are also adding audio memos of what to do and where to do. And in mechanical engineering, it's a very nice example too, because all of the skills that are needed, you can start improving them by repetition, but now adding digital remote feedback. So as I was mentioning, this is very interesting because we are now collecting a lot of data, a lot of inputs. We can analyze these feedbacks. We can understand if the comments have a certain pattern, if the audios have a certain tone, if the drawings are in a certain way, and we can understand better the way we're learning. This learning cycle, as we are saying, the C1Do1 learning cycle has an interface in between the trainer and the trainee. And that digital interface allows me to harvest data, which allows me in turn to optimize courses and create artificial intelligence. The data that's been accumulated since C1Do1 Foundation is simply amazing. First, we had 40,000, and now this year we will be reaching near 1 million inputs of teachers labeling videos and how trainees should improve this performance on their own videos. We are reaching many countries because everything now is remote and digital, but the trainees are basically learning at their own place and facilities while receiving feedback from a distant country. As an example, the laparoscopic course I was showing you, we have opened a training center in Tanzania, in Africa, and they are learning by receiving feedback from experts at Católica University. So this is really amazing. It works. When you start harvesting a lot of data, you can start creating this type of automation. And we have already published our first cases of automation in the laparoscopic course, especially the basic course. We hopefully want to keep using this type of data to create better performance, not only in the trainee, but in the teachers, and to help the teachers basically standardize the way they communicate to the trainees. This is just one of the final results I wanted to share with you, but if you start understanding that sometimes to take training from a classic intensive workshop, the classic workshop that every institution performs usually lasts between 1 hour to 5 hours, and they are really condensed. Sometimes this type of workshop is not so good compared to just repeating 2 times a training of 20 minutes, but in between adding this type of digital feedback. So what we're seeing here is that the control groups, both control groups were basically the intensive workshop, a 3-hour workshop that trainees had to do at Católica University. And when you separate this workshop in 2 sessions of training, but in between you add digital feedback with C1 Do1, then you can realize that the cutoff score, the percentage of passing rate from the trainees is much greater when you start using feedback in between the sessions. So this is something that we are now exploring, because it will mean that, for instance, institutions can start having this type of training that is much more effective than intensive workshops of 4 to 3 hours. So just to conclude and to finish this presentation, I think the future of learning needs to incorporate feedback, even if it's digital, if it's in a virtual world, if it's in a metaverse. You need someone to tell you what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong and how to improve. And we need to hopefully reach as many trainees as we can. And not this, the only way we can do this is by creating networks of teachers that will, if it's going to be an artificial intelligence in the future, this can only happen if you have the data set to create this. And the only way for that to happen is to have human networks, you know, feeding this type of data sets. So we are in the right track to change the way we're learning. To imagine when in a close future where you can ask Siri or Alexa how to basically perform anything you need. The only way to receive feedback is basically receiving these inputs from experts. So to conclude, and the way I'm seeing the future of learning is that we need to reach more trainees. We need to be able to do this. And the only way to do this using technology is by training artificial intelligence that might complement at the beginning some teachers on how to give feedback to these trainees so that you make it scalable. From a trainee point of view, what you need is individualized feedback, good quality individualized feedback, even in a metaverse, in a virtual reality setting. Anywhere you're training your skills, you need someone to tell you where you're failing, how you're failing, and how to improve this mistake. So in the future, if you talk to Siri and Siri tells you how to improve your mistakes, it will be because there were huge data sets that were trained with this kind of information that we're harvesting. And why not everyone to have this kind of accessibility? So we can have lifelong learning the way we prefer. Whenever we want, we can achieve the best feedback we can. Only this type of inputs will only be available if we train human networks that will eventually give this type of inputs to this potential artificial intelligence. So we need to achieve learning curves. As humans, we cannot skip this. We want to train ourselves fast, but it's not so easy for us to do this. We cannot skip the way, if we want to learn how to cook, we cannot skip the sessions of training and just go and cook. We need a learning curve. The only way to accelerate the learning curve is to have good quality feedback and an accessible good quality feedback. And the only way to have good accessible quality feedback so far is to develop this type of platforms that will enable all teachers to give feedback at scales to different masses everywhere in the world. So in the future, I don't see trainees going to university at daylight and at noon. Instead of that, what will happen is everyone will go at their own pace by learning their own way, at their own way. And they will be grabbing different things from different institutions. You will learn one skill from Católica University, another skill from Harvard, another skill from UNAM, and in that way, all these kind of micro certifications will end up being part of who the learner really is. So a trainee is basically going to be certified that that this trainee performs exactly what they need to do and how they need to do it, and they will be certified in those skills precisely only by using this type of technologies. So thank you again. Especially, I wanted to say thank you to the Global Digital Week for this invitation, to Horizons for kindly considering us, and hope we can see each other in person in a close future or in a metaverse. Why not?